Alright class, now we come to the last part of our 7th topic, Introduction to Programming. That is translators. Okay, 7.3 translators. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to define language translators, and then you should be able to differentiate types of language translators. There are compiler, interpreter, and assembler. So first, let's look at what is a language translator. It is a special program that translates programming source code into machine language. Programming source code here is the programming language that we have learned before, such as C, C++, Fortran, COBOL. Okay, now let's look at the types of language translators that we are going to discuss. Okay, kita akan bincangkan 3 types of language translators. There are assembler, interpreter, and compiler. So first, let's look at assembler. What is assembler? Assembler is a program that translates assembly language to machine language. So for this sentence, you can use it as definition, description, or to describe a function of assembler. So if the question asks you for definition or describe or give the function, you can use this sentence. So assembler is a program that translates assembly language to machine language. Hope you guys still remember assembly language that we have discussed in 7.1 before. Okay, kita dah discuss assembly language dalam topik 7.1 sebelum ini. So assembler adalah translator yang kita khas untuk assembly language. Example of programming language that use assembler is Fortran assembly program, macro assembly program, and symbolic optimal assembly program ataupun SOAP. Here's some illustration of how an assembly language codes are translate into machine code. Next, look at the second type of translator, iaitu interpreter. Interpreter is defined as program that translates high-level programming language into machine language one line at a time. So di sini interpreter dia akan translate high-level programming language kepada machine language one line at a time, baris demi baris. Examples of programming language that use interpreter adalah Python, Perl, Ruby, dan juga Lisp. Same here, the sentence for definition also you can use to give description and to give the function of interpreter. So if you look at the diagram here, we have the source code, and then we have in the middle we have to use an interpreter to translate the source code in order to produce the output of our program. So in your notes, we don't have these details, but I will explain to you a little bit how interpreter works. Okay, each time the source program or the source code runs, the interpreter translate and execute it statement by statement. Statement by statement means line by line tadi. Okay, because coding kita memang tulis secara baris demi baris. Satu arahan, satu statement. Ya. An interpreter does not produce an object code. Okay, bila programming language tu guna interpreter, dia tak ada menghasilkan apa-apa file lain lah yang dipanggil sebagai object code. Dia terus direct dapat produce output. One advantage of an interpreter is that when it finds errors, it displays feedback immediately. Okay, bila kita tulis program, kita buat coding, untuk interpreter ni mungkin kita punya coding tu ada error, ada kesilapan typing dan sebagainya atau syntax. Jadi jika ada error, interpreter ni dia akan display feedback immediately lah. Okay. So the programmer can correct any errors before the interpreter translate the next line of code. The disadvantage is that interpreted programs do not run as fast as compiled programs execute it. Okay, the disadvantage of using interpreter ni, programs do not run as fast as compiled programs execute it. Berbanding dengan compiler, so interpreter ni dia lambat sikit untuk execute ya. Now let's look at the third one, iaitu compiler. What is compiler? It is a program that translates the entire source code of high-level programming language into machine language. Okay, sama je dengan interpreter, memang dia orang convert high-level programming language kepada machine language. But the difference is here, okay? Compiler dia akan translate entire source code. Entire source code keseluruhan. Kalau interpreter tadi translate line by line. But for compiler dia translate entire source code. So examples of programming language yang menggunakan compiler C, C++, Java, Visual Studio, COBOL. Itu antaranya lah ya. Okay, kita tengok detail sikit how compiler works. As you look at here, the source code when have been compiled, dia akan produce satu file asing, iaitu satu file baru, iaitu dikenali sebagai object code. Tengok apa penerangan dia. So the machine language version that results from compiling the source code is called object code. Okay, so object code tadi adalah dalam bentuk machine language dah ya. Dia adalah hasil daripada compiling the source code atau coding yang dibuat oleh programmer tadi. The compiler stores the object code on storage media. So that's why akan wujud satu file baru lah selepas compile. Dipanggil object code. Itu kalau guna compiler. Kalau interpreter memang tak adalah benda ni. Ya. While it is compiling the source program into object code tadi, the compiler akan check lah the source program for any errors. Okay, kalau ada error, kesilapan apa-apa, compiler akan check. Kemudian dia akan produce a program listing yang akan contain the source code dan juga list of any error. Jika ada sebarang error dalam keseluruhan source code yang dia dah check tadi, dia akan produce a program listing. Yeah. This listing help the programmer make necessary changes to the source code and correct errors in the program. So coding ni if ada error memang kena betulkan dulu. Okay, kalau tidak program kita tak akan dapat run dengan elok lah. Tak akan dapat menghasilkan output yang dikendaki. So now untuk memahamkan lagi secara ringkasnya, let's look at the differences between interpreter and compiler dalam bentuk perbandingan macam ni lah ya. So if question asks you to differentiate between interpreter and compiler, you can use the definition tadi. You can just use the definition point tadi. Alright. Okay, if you use the definition, kita akan nampak perbezaan yang jelas dari segi cara dia translate. For interpreter, one line at a time, satu-satu baris di translate. Kalau compiler, dia akan translate keseluruhan source code yang dah siap tadi. Yang dah lengkap baru dia compile. Itu beza yang jelas. So memang you kena use this point lah to answer this kind of question. Besides that, kita boleh pakai point interpreter good for fast debugging, while compiler slow for debugging. Apa itu debugging? Ada point di sini, madam catat di bawah ni. Okay, bug ni adalah error lah. Okay, dalam programming kita panggil bug. Error tadi juga dikenali sebagai bug. An error or defect yang occur inside a computer program or hardware that causes it to produce an incorrect output or to behave in an unintended way is called a bug. Okay, bug. Debugging. Okay, so bila debugging ni maksudnya nak betulkan error. So kalau bahasa formalnya, debugging adalah identify and remove error. Proses untuk identify, kena pasti error kat mana, dan juga remove error tadi. So debug. So interpreter good for fast debugging, lebih cepat untuk debug ya, sebab dia line by line kan dia check. Untuk compiler ni slow for debugging. Next point yang kita boleh guna adalah execution time is more. Untuk interpreter nak execute atau nak run the program tu memerlukan masa yang lebih lama compare to compiler. Compiler execution time dia is less. Next point yang mungkin kita boleh guna adalah memory efficient since no intermediate object code is generated. Interpreter ni tak menyimpan apa-apa file baru selepas ditranslate, so tak menggunakan apa tambahan memory, so memory efficient lah. But for compiler, compiler requires more memory lah, memerlukan storage yang lebih because it generates intermediate object code. Because compiler ni dia menghasilkan apa tadi? Object code lah. Okay, so noted here, a single high level programming language dia boleh ada lebih daripada satu compiler dan interpreter working together to produce the final output. To know more detail about or to read more details about differences between interpreter and compiler, you can go to this link. Besides that, sebelum kita finish up our topic, Madam beri di sini juga in case question ask you the differences between type of translator tadi. So assembler convert low level language to machine language. Sementara interpreter atau compiler tadi it converts high level language to the machine language. Okay. Second point yang you boleh ambil adalah assembler, one statement translate into one machine code instruction. One statement ditranslate to one machine code instruction sahaja. But for interpreter atau compiler, one statement translate into many machine code instruction. Okay, one statement translate into many machine code instruction. Alright, itu kalau soalan tanya difference between assembler dan dua lagi translator untuk high level language. Okay, just prepare. So that's all for our final topic, introduction to programming. So kita end up dengan subtopic 7.3 translators. So here is our summary for 7.0 introduction to programming. Hope you guys still remember what is programming language. Programming language that we have learned. It has two types, iaitu low level and high level, where each of them have some examples that you need to remember. Okay, machine language and assembly language. For low level and high level, we have a lot of examples directly to the programming language name, okay, iaitu C, Pascal, COBOL, C++, Java and many more. And then our previous subtopic 7.2 programming paradigms, we have 3 types, iaitu procedural, object-oriented programming, object-oriented, and the last one is logic. And so for today, we end up 7.0 with translators. Okay, we have assembler, interpreter, and compiler. You can use this diagram to make your mind map or your concept map for this topic. So that's all for 7.0 introduction to programming. Thank you. Thanks for watching.